On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1995. We're going to be taking a look at Jeff Buckley, and he's going to be performing Grace. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So I'm just going to put this edit in here. Unfortunately, the video has been blocked on copyrights, so I've done a re-edit and re-uploaded it. As always, the link to the performance video is going to be in the description below, and I'll also pin it to the top of the comments with some timestamps so you guys can navigate the video a little bit more easily. But click on that link, watch the performance, and then come back here for the analysis, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. The first time that I heard Grace and saw this performance, it was something that you definitely have to watch it a few times in order to get the hang of the progression, all the playing that's going on here from Jeff as well. And just in the intro, the thing to look out for is the technical ability in that right hand, because if you don't play the guitar, you won't necessarily appreciate the amount of skill that Jeff had in that right hand with flat picking, because we've got this B flat 7th sus2 shape with the pull-offs on the high E string down to the B string and the G string as well, then just sliding up to the C position, same chord, same pull-offs, but with the right hand, he's just constantly flat picking, making it so clean, and considering that the tone is really clean as well, his playing is faultless. And the other thing to bear in mind is that he started playing guitar at age 5, so he's got all of those years of experience and practice to make something that actually is technically difficult to get down just look like it's a run-of-the-mill run. I don't think you need me to tell you that he was the son of Tim Buckley, and what I love about Jeff is the way that he just followed his own path and didn't want to copy what his father did, and it's something that his father wasn't necessarily that involved in his upbringing. But with Jeff, I think it's fair to say vocally as well, this isn't the kind of song you're going to hear being sung at karaoke because of the control that Jeff had with his voice, but also the range that he covered. I mentioned about having that octave range and taking you to the peak of that mountain. And in this composition, Jeff goes all over the place vocally. We've got from E3 all the way to an F sharp 5. And when we're talking about an F sharp 5, that is going to be the 14th fret of your high E string on your guitar. So just play that and try and get that vocally. And the way that Jeff sang, he had such perfect vocal technique that he just throw his voice into head voice and then go back into chest voice. He could also add rasp to his sound as well, and we will hear that a little bit later on. The other thing that he had which was so unique is that vibrato, and the way that it's fast, it's almost as if his whole head shakes at the same time as his vibrato at the same frequency. So it isn't particularly wide, so it's not going to be a dramatic vibrato in that sense, but it is dramatic in its own way. Looking at it from the compositional perspective, we've got such interesting chord changes going on here. Like I said, you're going to have to listen to this a few times to understand where Jeff's going. And we have chord changes that are semitones, and we go from one semitone to the next semitone to the next semitone, which is something that you rarely get in compositions, especially in mainstream pop music. There are always changes of tones. Just going semitones the whole time doesn't usually happen. Interestingly here, when Jeff does make that move down, he's keeping the same E minor chord ringing out at the top. So you're going to get almost a discord sound to it, but that's why it's interesting. Also, when you do take a step back and you're now up to speed with the progression, you'll find that Jeff has written this in quite a strict way, in that we've always got the home bass of that barred A on the 14th fret with the little riff that goes in there as well. It's the uplifting part of the song that is like home bass. And whenever we visit that site on the journey, it's familiar. It brings you back. And it means that throughout the composition, even though it feels like you're getting lost, you don't get lost, you come back home when that riff happens. You can also say that what we've just heard here is the mid-late, and you can organise the track if you want to. then repeating it is going to be easier because you're breaking it up into sections. But also in the intro, I love the way that the initial riff with all of that impressive flat picking going on is quite obscure, and it's going to sit in an uneasy place, but then we instantly get into that riff that is in A major, which means that you're now uplifted and it's going to sound a lot more familiar because it's just an A chord and all of the notes that are being played are in that major scale. It's going to really sit in well. So you've got that instant contradiction in the intro, and then when we get into the vocal, obviously now it's gone back to obscurity, and you're really going to have to focus in order to follow where Jeff's going with this progression. But musically, it is just so interesting. And Jeff Buckley, as an artist, is one of those who wrote in his own way, and he'd just take a song where he wanted to take it, and he wasn't trying to write mainstream pop. And I'm not even going to attempt the amount of influences that he cited, so many different genres, so many different artists, and this is what you got, just true artistry, and someone who wasn't conforming to a blueprint of any kind. He just listened to loads of music, loads of different artists, and then just wrote with his own inspiration, and this is the kind of thing you got. It is also interesting in that when you've got such an original artist as Jeff Buckley, when he then does a cover of another song, it is going to be a standalone cover because it's going to be so different to the original, and I'm referring to Hallelujah here. It's one of those songs that recently I analysed K.D. Lang singing it, but Jeff Buckley also known for his version of that song. It was a standalone version and one that was very popular. And it just goes to show what a true artist can do with a song, where he can take it. And also check out the live version that he would do of Hallelujah, because sometimes he'd throw in some minor chords and chord voicings that took it to a totally different place. A great measure of a performance and the emotional impact of that performance is how ridiculous the end of the video sounds, because the way that the presenter then just says Jeff Buckley, and it is now so unemotional compared with where Jeff just left you at the end of that performance, putting absolutely everything into it and being so upfront, taking you right to the peak of that mountain. But it's a great show of just true artistry in order to play on a TV show where you can see there's no crowd there, and if anything, the whole atmosphere is flat. And if you are going to watch this video after this analysis, watch the intro as well, because the intro is really flat as well. And you can see Jeff in the background, he throws his arms up into the air when the presenter mentions his father, but he's just going to do his thing. He's just going to perform. He's going to give you his energy. And another thing I want to point out is the way that this is so refreshing to see, a totally live performance, and you can hear the changes between effects going on with the guitars. And it's great just to hear a live drum kit, and it's not overly produced. The changes from the distorted sound on the guitar to clean are abrupt, because that's what happens when you play live and you change your pedals. It's just something that you can't edit out of a live performance. So it's refreshingly live. Also with that whole lead vocal, you can tell that Jeff is just throwing caution to the wind, but I do also want to get into Jeff's history and career on this video as well. He was raised by his mother and stepfather, and he was the son of Tim Buckley, like I said, but he only met Tim once when he was 8 years of age. And he was known as Scotty to his family because he was raised as Scott Moorhead, and he only took his father's name as a stage name, so just the surname Buckley. His mother was a trained pianist and cellist as well, so music definitely ran in the family. And when he was young, he listened to bands like Led Zeppelin, The Who, Pink Floyd, Queen, Jimi Hendrix. And as he got older, he then moved on to more progressive stuff like Genesis, Rush, Yes as well. And when he was 19 years of age, he did attend a musician's institute, but he said that that was the biggest waste of time. And he then went on to work in a hotel, all the while playing in struggling bands, but also playing in bands of lots of different genres. He was hugely inspired by the music of India and Pakistan as well. It was Herb Cohen who offered to help Jeff record his first demo, and Herb was his father's former manager. So, Jeff made his public singing debut at a tribute concert for his father, and at that he performed I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain, and this was a song that was about an infant Jeff Buckley and his mother. He also performed other songs at the tribute concert, and he made a big impression. He started co-writing material with guitarist Gary Lucas in 1991, and this is where Grace came from. They wrote that together, as well as Mojo Pin, and he started performing with Gary's band, and they were called Gods and Monsters, but then he did leave the band and start playing at clubs and cafes, and he managed to secure a Monday night slot at the venue Cinnes, which was in Lower Manhattan, and while playing there he started to attract attention. There was a lot of record label interest as well, and he did sign a 3-album deal with Columbia Records. They released Live at Cine in 1993, and he started work on his first original album. He was touring as well in North America and Europe in order to draw attention to the Live at Cine album, and while he was on this first full band tour, he had people in the audience such as Chrissie Hynde, Chris Cornell, and The Edge. In 1994, he released his debut album, Grace, and this is the title track that we've just heard. He also had his cover of Hallelujah on that album, which everybody knows now, but at the time, the album was critically acclaimed but didn't sell massively well commercially, and it would go on to go gold in 2002 in the USA and go 6 times platinum in Australia in 2006. During the 90s, Bob Dylan said that Jeff was one of the great songwriters of the decade. Jimmy Page said it was his favourite album of the decade, and David Bowie said that if he was stranded on a desert island, out of 10 albums, one of them would be Jeff Buckley's Grace. The album since made it onto Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list, in there at number 303, and he would be touring and playing as much as possible, but when he wasn't touring, he would still be performing at Cinnes, and when he did tour, all of the audio has been released posthumously on various albums. Unfortunately, in 1997, the bassist left the band, so it meant that Jeff went back to performing in cafes and doing these smaller gigs where he would use an alias, and he enjoyed performing without people prejudging him because of his name, and also just having that anonymity of not knowing who you are before you perform. Artistically, that's really what he enjoyed. In 1996, he worked with Patti Smith on the album Gone Again, and that was released the same year. He also started writing material for a new album, which was going to be called My Sweetheart the Drunk. And unfortunately, the band were dissatisfied with how it was going in the studio. They were playing in a Memphis bar in order to get tight, and also Jeff would perform solo as well to work on different ideas for the album, and because they weren't happy with the sound, they got in touch with Andy Wallace, who was the producer on Grace. So they wanted to make that change from a production perspective in order to get a better sound, and a sound that they were confident in. At this point, the story does take a tragic turn, because in 1997, Jeff was working on original material for the next album. He called his band to travel to Memphis with him in order to help and to record. And it was May the 29th that Jeff decided to go for an impromptu swim, and he was fully clothed, and this was at the Wolf River Harbor, which is a slack water channel of the Mississippi River. And apparently he was singing Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin when he went out for his swim. His roadie was on the shore, and there was a tugboat coming, and the roadie turned around in order to make sure that the guitars and the amps weren't going to get wet because of the wake caused by the tugboat. And when he turned around, he couldn't see Jeff anywhere. He had disappeared. So a rescue effort started that night, but they couldn't find Jeff. And tragically, 6 days later, his body was found, and that was still in the Wolf River by a riverboat, and there were no drugs or alcohol in his system. It was just classed as an accidental drowning. So another case of an artist taken at such a young age. He was only 30 when he died. And sketches from For My Sweetheart the Drunk were released posthumously, and the release of that album was overseen by family members and Michael J. Klaus as well, and Chris Cornell. And interestingly, in 2008 is when Hallelujah, his version of it, got to #1 on iTunes, and this was following a performance of one of the contestants on American Idol, and it also debuted at #1 that week as well. And here in the UK, in the X Factor, which is a similar talent contest, the winner of the show released a version of Hallelujah, and fans of Jeff countered this by getting everybody to purchase his version of Hallelujah, and that made it to #2 in the UK charts. And this was despite not being released physically as a CD, you could only download it. So, unfortunately, the X Factor version got to #1, but that's what always happens in this country. As soon as that TV show comes on, it's just a guaranteed #1, no matter what the song or the contestant's ability who's actually won the show. But it is great to look back here at a true artist, Jeff Buckley, in full flow, not only showing his vocal ability, his technical ability on the guitar, but just his all-round artistic ability for composing and writing something that is so interesting from every single perspective. But thank you guys for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!